Hello, welcome to Dazzlius, learning the language of autism. Belle here. Okay, so this is week 2 of our lovely senses and autism videos. And this week we're going to be talking about touch. It's quite a complex one, touch. And sometimes I flip from thing to thing and it's like, ah. So I'm going to do my best to keep it as logical as I can, but I can't make any promises. So, touch can mean unpleasant, overwhelming, or it can mean that it's so pleasurable that it needs to keep happening over and over and over and over again in various different forms and textures and stuff. So, and it also crosses over with sound and taste as well. So that's when it's called synesthesia, is when the senses and cognitive pathways involuntary. I'll read it. It says one sense or cognitive pathway leads to involuntary experiences in a second pathway, mixing them up. That's from the internet. I've got that bit from the internet. So it's basically when all the when senses kind of like become, you can feel two sensory experiences. Or as an example, some people will say that a person or a voice smells or has, when a person, I've heard people that have this have said, oh God, you are the colour green, or you are the sound of C minus, or stuff like that. It's can smell colour, like a red will smell of something, and it's different for everybody. But I've mentioned it because as we go through each week, a lot of the senses and stuff with heightened senses and everything, they kind of like, some sensations cause other things. So particularly with touch, sometimes when people say certain words, for people that have this situation going on with experiencing sensory overload, they can experience it through touch or through it touching the skin. So some words can cause a prickly sensation on the arms, or I've heard some people say that certain words can cause it to feel like there's 1,000 ants crawling all over their skin, or it can cause like a physical sensation inside the body, or a sound can cause, it can cause physical feelings in or on the body. So, touch. Our boy, when he was younger, was very touch sensitive and also couldn't cope with people being too close and near him for hugs, kisses and such like. But what we also learned through this was that it wasn't because he didn't want to be touched or he didn't yearn to be cuddled, he just couldn't handle it. So two very different things. So some people with this say, no, I don't want to be hugged, I don't yearn to be hugged, and I'm okay with never being hugged. So again, everything that I say isn't set in stone, it's individual for every person. I just go on the experiences that I've had and that my son has had, and also I add to that lots of different things that people have told me over the years who are autistic or who have this sensory issue. So their sensory need is different to their emotional need, is what I'm saying, is when it comes to hugs sometimes. So George is okay with being hugged now-ish. He still has boundaries, and I respect those, like we all do. But he especially likes being squeezed. So hugging him, like, he likes to be, if you're going to touch him. Like, he really enjoys being squeezed. And when he was really, 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 really young, I learnt about squeezing and the squeeze machine from Temple Grandin, who did kind of like find this out when she was around cows and noticed that when they go into their squeeze machine to be immunised, that they relaxed, and she needed this herself, so she put herself inside the squeeze machine and she felt really good. So she kind of talked about this as a thing, which, whereas now today we have weighted blankets, and a lot of people that have this need, that they can't handle a hug, but they need that sensation of being hugged, can cope with a weighted blanket, can really help that. It can also help with other conditions and other things, but we're talking about autistic people and people with sensory processing challenges to do with touch. But it's worth also remembering that weighted blankets come in different weights. So depending on your child, on their height, their weight and their age and their need, that sometimes it's best to start with a kind of like, be aware of the weight of the actual blanket, because some blankets are so heavy for the little ones that they get really hot in bed, and then they don't want the blanket, and it can cause it's a counteractive situation. And it might not be that, it's not because the weighted blanket is any good, it's just that the blanket was too heavy. So just be aware of that, and also be aware of what the blanket is made of. There are blankets now, I think, that are filled with bamboo, or they're filled with little bits of metal, or some are filled with plasticky type substances. So depending on your needs, your child's needs, their allergies and all the rest of it, you will be able to figure all that out. But they're really good, even if they're just laying on the sofa and they just need to chill out and relax. Often a weighted blanket is a really good thing to help for so many different reasons. Also, textures are really important to George, and as our boy, and he's always been that way. He loves seeking out different textures and feelings, and he also likes things that are really warm. Like if a quilt has been in a tumble dryer, doesn't happen very often, but if it has gone in the tumble dryer, I always make sure, if George is around, I'll be like, oh George, and he just oof. He also likes sequin changing textures, and he likes furry textures, and just things that feel good, because he doesn't like wearing clothes once he gets home. He never has, ever since he was a baby. When he was really young and he had a baby grow on, he used to rip it off and would be, stressed until it was off. He couldn't handle wearing a nappy, so his nappy would come off. So you can imagine that was really interesting when he was younger and he needed to wear a nappy, and he wasn't yet toilet trained, but we got through it, we got around it, and he obviously couldn't bear it for a reason. And when he was really little, he definitely couldn't tell us why, and we had no idea what was going on, but I just knew it was uncomfortable, so I never made him wear. I'd always put a nappy on him and he'd keep it on for a bit, but he would take it off, especially at night. He would sleep completely naked at night, and I've heard other kids with that, and some of the problem solving ways of dealing with that would be to put the baby grow on back to front, so that they couldn't actually access the buttons to undo it. But we never went down that road, because I just felt how frustrating and awful it would be if you were desperately needing to go to sleep and you had an item of clothing on you that you couldn't bear to have on because it just felt so uncomfortable and awful, and then you couldn't get it off. So, that wasn't something that we did. We just would put it on him every night, which he was happy for us to do, and then he'd get into bed and then he would just take it off along with his nappy, and that would be that. and that's how we handled it. And even to this day, he still likes to, go to bed naked, which most people do, I think. So now, as he's grown over the years, before he'd just wrap a blanket around him at home, he'd take off his clothes from school or being outside, and then he'd just wear a blanket. Well, now he's 15 and he's bigger and he's a young man. At home, it's not an issue for me whether he's naked or not. But as he's going to start staying in different places and he's going to be mixing with other people, not everybody out there in society, in our culture, is cool and comfy with nakedness. So I've spent a couple of years helping George accustomed to wearing a dressing gown when he's at home, just chilling. So now he just does. Now he's gotten used to it. It took us a little while to get his head around it. And he still has a blanket, which he likes, but he wears a dressing gown now. And it's a really lovely, got really nice fabric ones. He's got a few different ones and he really loves wearing those. So remember, when your children are really young and small and things are extremely challenging and incredibly difficult, and you think, I can't allow them to do this now because what happens when they're older? My advice, because I've been there, done that, is remember that every thing is a process. So George couldn't bear wearing anything at all, just would barely wrap a blanket around him when he was younger, and then as the years have gone on, he's slowly become more able to accept. Now he wears a dressing gown. So these things do progress, these things do develop, and they do change. But it's always, I find, important to start where your child is and what they need, especially if you don't know why. Because if you don't know why, but you're still... Like, I didn't know why George didn't like wearing clothes, or didn't like wearing a baby grow, or didn't like wearing a nappy. I didn't know about that. He wasn't yet diagnosed, and I had no idea. So I felt it would have been unfair for me to force that upon him when I didn't know the reason, because it was distressing him so much, and it felt torturous and a bit cruel. So now, and for years, I've understood why. It makes sense. So therefore, there's always a reason for these things, always a reason. And the way we've always worked is we don't make, we don't force, we don't stress, we don't restrain, we don't do any of those things. As long as they're safe and they're not going to get harmed or harm anybody else, then that's the way we've parented. And now it's paying off. He wears clothes when he's out and about. He puts, he's no problem with wearing clothes. But when he's home, he does like to take those clothes off. And as long as he can wear a dressing gown, I'm okay with that. So that's another touch sensitive situation. So the kind of behaviours that can happen if touch is unpleasant is, it's fairly obvious really, but I'll just go through some of them. Especially when children are really young and you're new to this, you're a new parent with a new kid, you don't know anything really about autism or sensory processing, and we don't know what's going on. So they could scream, cry, bang, obviously rip stuff off. They could scratch, they could even vomit, they could headbang, they could whack their own faces, they could pinch the skin, stuff like that. It could be quite extreme behaviour, and it could be because touch is causing an incredible amount of distress and discomfort. Also, those with touch sensory issues, it could also mean that they enjoy touch and texture and that feeling so much that they keep doing it. So they could constantly keep rubbing themselves, licking themselves, rubbing themselves, just or a cloth or a table or whatever texture it is that really does it for them. So which means they could also do it to other people. So I've met quite a few children over the years and adults that have been that way and have been constantly just stroking or kissing or rubbing, or they might find a texture on a you know, they might like the texture of this, so they might feel they just need to hold it all the time, touch it all the time, put it over their mouth all the time. George used to have like a piece of plastic that came with a packaging thing, and he just used to, we cleaned it all and everything, and he just needed it to be with him like every day all the time for about 2 years, and then he just got off it and then he threw it away and he moved on to something else. So look out for that, and if it's okay, like it doesn't, one of the biggest tips that I can give as a parent to an autistic child person is let go of the tradition, let go of socially accepted toys and objects, because that often does to some autistic children. But for George, those things never mattered. He didn't care whether it was a train or a car or a, he didn't need toys. He needed sensory seeking, satisfying objects, which became toys, right? So something like this would be something that became very precious to George. So he would need that with him in his bag all the time. Sometimes, like he's got toys and things, but what I'm saying is that sometimes an object can become so important, and it can be for lots of other reasons, but primarily for touch, the subject of touch today, it could be because it just feels good. It just feels good. And they like it. They like licking it, doing all of this. It's really, and I feel personally, why not? It's really important, I think, to honour the sensory needs of your children and people that you care for, because it means they're going to be relaxed, they're going to be at ease, they're not going to be as anxious, and therefore they're going to engage in society and with people when they trust that you are not going to continuously keep taking things away from them which they clearly need. So textures and things can be so important that sometimes you may find, you know, I mean, we live in a society now where we can buy so many different textures, and a really good place to get them from is like a fabric shop, because you can go and get like cut-ins of different textures without spending a fortune, and then you can bring them home and just see which ones your child really responds to and really enjoys, and then you can either make cushions and pillow covers, or if you're really creative, or you can just buy, then you can start spending some money and buying, oh, I'll buy a weighted blanket with that material on it, or I'll get a seamstress to make a cover for the weighted blanket with this texture on it. Do you know what I mean? Things like that, that you can really help your children and people that you care for that have this in a really positive way, and create an environment for them that is friendly and comforting and nurturing and safe for them. So yeah, they may do a lot of licking, a lot of tasting, a lot of head banging, a lot of, but they could do a lot of kissing. It's just so much to do with touch, and they, if touch is big for them, they, you know, they look out for touching things that may harm them, that they may not be aware of, but they just might like the feel of, like things like because some seek out some kind of sensation on touch, so they might touch like a hot ring on a hob, or they might want to go and touch a you know, a flame, and not know that that is hot. Do you know what I mean? So same with cold, they might do it with snow or ice, or they might want to lick, just obviously, you know, they're your children, you need to make sure they're safe, but the reason could be that it's a sensory seeking need. And if you can accommodate it in other ways, which 9 times out of 10 you can, like if they like feeling warm things, for example, you could get like a hot water bottle with a cover over it, and then they can constantly have like a warm sensation from a hot water bottle, or that you can fill a bottle up with warm water, so they've always got warmth near them. There's loads of different things you can do, and you can also do that with cold. Like you can get really experimental when we stop thinking about toys as what they need, but rather than objects and items, and then your world's your oyster. It's fantastic. Animals can be really helpful, not for everybody, because then that can come into like the nose sensory challenge. If animals are smelly, it can cause distress and anxiety. But because animals can be fluffy and furry, sometimes that can be a really lovely thing if your child person that you care for is likes animals. You know, isn't afraid. George doesn't look particularly. He's a bit wary of dogs, just because of a few experiences that he's had in the past. But I know that if he could get his head around loving a dog, he would love the texture. He would love to stroke, but he's just too afraid of dogs, so that's a no-no. But animals can be a real sensory touch, um, pleasant sensation. So that's definitely worth looking at if you hadn't thought of that before, and it might help your child as long as they don't squeeze it to death and they know that it's an animal, not a teddy bear. I've seen quite a few. There's loads of things on the internet actually of autistic children that have got beautiful infinities with animals: cats, rabbits, chickens, dogs, horses, of course, are amazing. All sorts of things, birds. It's amazing. So that's touch. So if a person is feeling anxious or unpleasant around touch, they may they may run away. If for example, they're going, so you're going to a family event like a birthday party or a gathering, or it's just, oh, it's Sunday and the family are coming over for dinner, or it's Billy's birthday, or Bonnie's birthday, and the family are coming over, that could in itself be a bit of a nightmare for an autistic child, with just the overwhelming of so many people coming. But it could be because that this child knows not only are they coming, but they are all going to be like wanting to hug me and kiss me and be close to me, and be in my face, and I've got to be there, and there's going to be a lot of closeness and a lot of touching, and it could be enough to be like, I really can't handle this, and they will lock themselves in their room, hide under the bed, go in cupboards, or they could lash out. So it could be for lots of other reasons, but if it is a touch issue, it's worth saying to those other family members, don't do the whole come here and give me a kiss. Come on, Granny's here, give me a kiss. Like, if just honour that they don't want to give you a kiss. It's not personal. They won't want kisses. And if we don't ask for those kisses or those cuddles, then they may be able to cope with you being here, because they know you're not going to ask those things of them. Sometimes anxiety and takes over, and it can just change the whole experience of of what could be a fairly okay experience, but the thought of being touched and the expectations of that could put off a visit. So it's like breaking everything down and finally tuning, why doesn't my child like people come into the house? What are the reasons? And one of those reasons, or one of the main reasons, could be because mummy, they want me to sit next to them, they want me to sit on their lap, they want me to kiss them, they want to kiss me, and they're constantly touching, and it's just too much for me. So it could be that you just need to educate the family members as well, to make everybody happy. I think that's all I can say about touch at the moment. Sometimes, as I said that already, words can feel unpleasant. Some words, which is where the synesthesia situation comes into play, where some people will say a word and the skin feels really prickly and itchy. So some people that are touch sensitive can experience sensory stimuli through skin, through touch, words, music, smells. It's like someone might be just talking and I might just say the word, I don't know, plastic. And it might be a word that's a trigger that just sends like real sharp shooting pains, or sensations of itchiness or heat or fire through their bodies. And it could then that could cause them to freak out, or freak out by that I mean scream, or hit themselves or make a sound or um, run away, cry, vomit. Oh my God. I mean, this sensory overload of stuff can be seriously intense, which is why I'm doing this series and why I'm breaking down all of the senses, because it's massive. It's 90%, if not more. Autistic people out there, please help me, tell me, comment what you think, but it's probably 90% of an autistic person's reasons for distress and anxiety. And also it can bring a lot of pleasure. There is the other end of the spectrum where these sensory things are really pleasurable and beautiful and gorgeous for them, but it's a biggie. So it's a really big subject. So throughout the series, if I'm like repeating myself or it feels like I'm overlayering or whatever, that will be why. It will be because they all kind of interlock as you go along. You'll see that someone speaking in a certain tone could cause a person to vomit. And you think, well, it's not a smell, they're speaking. Why are they vomiting? Because of the sound of somebody's voice. The voice doesn't smell. But if the sensation of that tone of that voice is so intense to that person, sometimes it can cause vomiting or something like it. I'm just giving you some extreme examples. These are extreme, but they are still very real. Or the feeling of nausea, you know? And this is when they all start to cross over and it all becomes a bit like, wow. So that might happen as the weeks go on. So next week, we will talk about sight. We'll do sight next week. We'll do the visual stuff. We've done sound. We've done touch. So we'll do sight. And, there will be some crossovers from that already, from what I've already said. So be prepared. I will put links at the bottom of this video of links that I think might be helpful, extended research, videos of other people talking about this, a link to the book that I first read when a doctor, talking about stuff that nobody was really talking about before he was, about autism and sensory needs. Like, he was kind of like the first one that really highlighted this, and this was way back. I think he wrote the book in like the late 60s, early 70s, and I don't think it was published for a while. And I came across it in the very early 90s, if not the beginning of 1990. I found it then, and well before George was born, and I'm so glad that I did. It's sensory needs and processing is incredibly important to research and study and learn and really get to know what those things mean for your kid, because it will really help you understand your child's behaviour and the reasons why they behave in certain ways, and it will really help you have a closer relationship with them, and it means that you can understand them and honour them and buy appropriate things for them without wasting your money and getting disappointed and them getting disappointed, and it can save so much conflict and upset if we understand the sensory needs of an autistic person, or those that aren't autistic but have sensory processing condition. So I really strongly recommend that you share this information and anything else that you learn about sensory stuff with your other family members, so everybody gets to understand and is on the same page. But thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Please do subscribe so that you get your little alert button if you click on the bell, and share and comment and let me know what your experiences are, what you found with your children, or if you're autistic yourself or have sensory processing condition. Please, the more we share, the more we learn, the more we can share on to others, and we can help each other out. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all next week. This is a long video, I apologise, but it was quite a big subject. Bye for now.